Today we're creating glowing holiday lights filled with a merry message and surrounded by evergreen elements. We're only using one brush for this entire piece, and it's my Inky Edge Pro brush from my beautiful lettering brush set, but you can use any brush that you'd like. The color palette for this project is free as always. Just tap on the link in the video description and you can download and install it. I'm going to start by creating a brand new canvas. I've listed my specs on screen, and let's begin. Okay, I've got my brand new canvas, and the first thing we're going to do is set our background color. So come to your layers, tap on background color, and choose the very first color in the top row. Next, we're going to begin working on our holiday lights. So I like beginning this by creating my lettering first and then creating the light bulbs behind them. So on this very first layer, this is going to be our lettering layer. So I'm just going to label this one lettering. I'm going to switch to my white, so it's the last color on the top row, and I've got my Inky Edge Pro brush selected, and now I'm just going to write in all caps, kind of wonky, my lettering, and the size of my brush is about 10%. So I'm only going to write the words merry and the word bright. I'm not going to put and in the middle yet, and I'm going to space them out so I've got room between them for when we create those bulbs. I feel pretty good about this, but I did write it at a bit of an angle, so I'm going to correct that now just by rotating it a little bit, and then I'm going to make sure that it's centered on my canvas. Okay, deselect. Now we're going to paint in the light bulbs behind all the letters. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, and I'm going to drag it underneath the lettering layer. And I'm going to put all the bulbs on one layer, but you can separate them if you'd rather do that. The reason why I'm putting them all on one layer is we're going to add a glow layer later, and it'll be a lot easier if they're all together. I'm going to alternate colors. You can really do any mixture of colors that you'd like, but I'll let you know which colors I'm using as I move along. So the very first color I'm going to put behind the M is the third color on the second row. And in order to draw these bulbs, it's kind of like a triangle with rounded corners. So, and I'm not perfect about this at all. Mine are super wonky looking, and then I'm just going to fill it with color and then move on to the next one. The next one's going to be this almost fluorescent color. It's the fourth one on the top row. And I also change the size of these as they go along just to add a little bit more character to everything. The next color I'm going to use is the one right underneath that color. Then I'm going to switch to this blue color. It's the second to the last one on the second row. Fill that in. And then for the Y, I am going to use this last color on the second row. And if you have any overlaps, you've probably seen me doing this. I just paint that in, and then we're all set. So we've got our top row of lights. Now we're moving on to the bottom row. So the first color is going to be the same as the second R up at the top. The R I'm going to make the same color as the Y on the top row. The I is going to be the same color as the M. The G is going to be that fluorescent color. H is going to be the same color as the first R. And then the T is going to be the same color as my M was at the very beginning. You could also totally do circles for these light bulbs if you wanted to. I just like the look of that traditional style bulb for these. And now we're going to put the little hooks on top of the bulbs. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, and we're going to use the second color on the second row. So what I'm going to do is draw like a trapezoid. It's kind of like an awkward rectangle, and then fill it in and give myself a loop. And I'm going to make the loop fairly large because I need to pass a string or a light cord through here. So I want to make sure I'm giving myself enough room for that. And I'm just going to zoom out really quick to make sure my scale feels right. I don't want to make it seem like these are too big. I think that's okay scale-wise. I might make the next ones a little bit smaller. And then repeat the same thing down here. And I want to make sure I'm still giving myself enough room to write the word and, which I'm realizing that these are pretty tight right now. So before I go any further, I'm going to move those down. So what I'm going to do is select all of my layers. So I'm going to select the lettering layer and then drag these ones over so everything is selected. And then I can come up here and hit my selection tool and make sure freehand is selected. And I'm just going to create a selection of all of this and then grab it and move it down a little bit. And because all those layers were selected, that's what's allowing me to move everything at the same time. Okay, now I've got a little more space that I can work with. Let me make sure I'm on the right layer. I think I'm going to move bright down even further before I draw my string in, because I just feel like the space right here is just too tight for me to also fit the word and in. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Select everything, create a selection of just those bulbs, and then just move them straight down. That'll make things a lot more comfortable. And now I can just recenter this. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. I've labeled this layer that had all the tops on them. I've labeled that tops. I'm going to create a brand new layer right above it. And I'm selecting my first color on my second row. And my brush size, I've reduced it a little bit. I've come down to about 7%. And what I want to do is draw a line through all of these loops, write the word and right here, and then bring it all the way back down and off. So that's what I'm going to do, only I'm going to make it look a lot better than that. To make it look even more believable that it's passing through all of these, I'm going to apply some layer masking. You could just use the eraser tool if you want. Using layer masking is just a much cleaner and less destructive way of working. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to tap on this and layer. Let me label this and. And I'm going to apply a layer mask to this. So tap on the layer thumbnail and choose mask. If you're unfamiliar with layer masking, I have a free course called Procreate for Beginners. It's entirely free. It walks you through all the basics of Procreate. So if you don't know what layer masking is, there's an entire module. You will be an expert at the end of it if you decide to take that free class. So I'll leave a link on screen and in the video description to that. So I'm going to do something a little bit more advanced right now. You could just paint these in plainly. You could erase them away, but this is a more advanced skill. So I'm going to share how I do it. What I'm going to do is select my tops layer. So tap on the layer thumbnail and choose select. And then I'm going to return back up to my layer mask layer. So the layer mask is the brighter blue. I'm going to make sure that I have black selected, so you can double tap to get true black. I've got that layer mask selected. And now if I choose to paint away just the first one right here, it's going to stay in the bounds of this loop because I made that selection. So now I'm not having to be super careful to not erase away too much of my string. I know I'm only erasing the string that is overlapping this loop. So it just makes for a much cleaner mask, and you can be a little more careless when you're painting it away because you know it's going to stay within the bounds. So if I try and paint over here, it's not going to show up because I have that selection active. That makes that whole process way quicker. So then I can just deselect and we're all set, and it looks like they're intertwined right here, which is exactly the look that we're going for. So the rest of this tutorial is all about decorating and filling in all the gaps and making it feel really festive. So first I'm going to paint in some evergreen elements, and then we'll put some background elements. So for my evergreen elements, I'm going to create a brand new layer up on top. I'm going to grab my brown color, and let me reduce the size of my brush just a little bit. I was at 7% for the string, so let's come down to 5%. And what I'm going to do is just draw some branches. I'm going to have two together in some places and then just one on its own in other places too. And these are going to be going in all different directions. So it just feels like they're kind of swirling with the winter wind. And make sure that you bleed some of these off of the edges too. It'll just make everything feel a lot more dynamic if it's not just floating in this one square. Okay, now that I have my branches in there, I'm going to create a brand new layer, and I'm going to grab that fluorescent color again. So it's the fourth one on the top row, and about half of these I'm going to do in one color and half of them I'm going to do in another color. So just keep that in mind. Don't apply this color to all of them. So for these evergreens, I'm just going to put a line up at the top and progressively make the needles larger as they come down. And it's a really simple way to give a nice festive little element to your piece. Okay, I'm going to create a brand new layer, and I'm going to switch to this light blue color, which is the one right next to the color we were just using on the top row, and then do the exact same thing with this color. Okay, we've got some evergreen branches in there now, and now I want to add in some pine needles. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to switch to this fourth color on the bottom row, and I'm going to reduce the size just a little bit. I'm going to come down to 4%. And for these ones, I'm just going to fill in some of the gaps that I have here. So what these look like is they're just a few lines up, and the sides, both sides kind of curve into each other, and then you've got straight ones in the middle. So I do about 4 or 5 of these for each one of these like little sprigs. of needles, and I make sure that these go in all different directions. You want to make them look like they're flying in the wind again. And then to just finish those off, create a brand new layer, grab your brown again, and we're just going to put a little dot at the end, or it's kind of more like a little line. And then the last thing we're going to add in, just to kind of tie everything together that we have, are some really loose, sketchy style leaves in the background. So I'm going to create a brand new layer and drag it all the way down above my background layer, but beneath my light layer. And we're going to paint in some leaves. And then after that, we're going to make everything glow. So this is the last part of our background. And then the glow will be like the final touch that brings everything to life. On this layer, we're going to switch to the second color on the top row. So these ones are really sketchy and they're in the background. So don't be nervous about drawing them. We're just going to draw a line up, make a sketchy leaf, sketchy leaf, sketchy leaf. And we're just going to come around the entire background putting these in, and these are going to go every which way too. And you can vary the amount of leaves, you can vary the size of them. They're just background elements that are going to help push all of the other elements we've already created forward. Okay, we've got our background elements in, and now we're going to make everything glow. So what I'm going to do is take my light layer and drag it to the left, choose duplicate the bottom one, select the bottom one, and then go to your magic wand, Gaussian blur, and then just drag it up. I'm going to come up to about 10%, and I'm going to duplicate this. So slide it to the left and choose duplicate. For the top one, I'm going to set a blend mode of overlay, and then for the bottom one, I'm going to set a blend mode of screen. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing for the lettering, but we don't want it to glow as much because we want to maintain that readability. So we're only going to do one duplicate on this. So drag it to the left, choose duplicate, select the bottom one, Gaussian blur, and I'm only going to come up a little bit, like 4% maybe, and then change this one to screen. And that will make it nice and bright. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you next week.